moment to tell you about my fieldwork in Kazakhstan. So the fieldwork
We don't hear you talk about
The fieldwork is based on the site, which is the Central Mosque, the monumental mosque. One of the example in Natalie's presentation. So, but it is monumental, but it's also very much used space. Around 6,000, between 6,000 and 7,000 people attend Friday sermons in this mosque. There are always people in the mosque. It's open 24 hours. I myself, as a person who lives and works in Astana, had to attend this mosque several times for non-fieldwork related reasons. First was the nikah ceremony that I attended, and there was 3 also memorial dinners in the restaurant of the mosque that I attended for non-fieldwork. Of course, I was observing and thinking of what's going on, but it was non-fieldwork related. It's a part of the sort of the symbolic national space. It's in the new Independence Square next to this Independence Nazarbayev stela, and it is the most sort of popular. This Independence Square is a very desolate place, but mosque is sort of the corner of this square where there are lots of people, where people come. So I've interviewed imams in this mosque, 7 naib imams, and I also talked to parishioners, and I listened to the sermons, Friday sermons. I've also interviewed several functionaries of the former Against Her, like agency on the religious affairs, which is now the committee, the committee of the religious affairs. So some of the major issues from which larger questions that I think are relevant to and frame this paper is sort of the challenges that religious community is facing in Kazakhstan. So how a religious community can fit into the modernizing nation-state project. This is a question. How to fit into the framework of good moderate Islam and correspond to the good traditional Islam image. And I use traditional here, not in the both in the Muslim traditional sense and in the sense of the sort of historical cultural context. That's something that has been something that is in continuity with the Muslim community over a period of history since the establishment of Islam. And like question for I guess individual believers, how to be religious and not to be accused of excessive religiosity. And that's why sort of Hanafi orthodoxy comes into. So one can sort of claim Hanafi orthodoxy as a tradition both in religion, both in Islam, as well as in sort of tradition of the land, so to speak. And if one sort of can prove that there is a unity between the national and the religious, then one's religiosity and piety is sanctioned by tradition, which is very important in Kazakhstan in the sort of nationalist framework. So the sort of rapprochement between the state and Islam, the whose goal is it to build a Muslim nation in Kazakhstan. And I'm not saying that this is a state's goal to build a Muslim nation, although it depends on there are some people and some parts of the state who are who are advocating for Islam to be a part of the strong part of the national identity. But there are some people and parts of the government that are not comfortable with that. But the one thing is clear that they, as one of the former functionaries of the Against told me, like the poise to show, the train of Islamization has left, and now we only can get on the train and try to change direction, or and ride the wave, or like we are, we cannot not acknowledge that it is a fact that the train has left. And of course, the religious establishment definitely wants to lead a Muslim nation and seek support from the government in this task, and is ready to advance the government agenda. as long as it does not contradict some of its core principles. And I just want to emphasize that religious establishment, like so-called Духовное управление Мусульман Kazakhstan, the muftiyat, they're not just the puppets of the government. They're having their own agenda, and they are trying to be honest, like in terms of what they are. I will talk about this further, but for instance, on some core issues like polygamy, they will not say that, oh no, you cannot. They will say, like, they would say that we cannot say, like, because it is in the book, we cannot say that, you know, like, we cannot discourage Muslims from taking a second wife, but we should advise them and so on, but we will never say no. And it is an issue that has been, that some parts of the state has been pushing for instance, having the certificate from from ZAGs before going to the mosque, and they have been fighting hard to sort of maintain this. And there are many issues about this. This is again one of the most visible. So, cooperation between the state and the Muslim community in Kazakhstan springs from mutual understanding and interest, rather than Soviet-style control and rigid authoritarian state imposition. The state, in its quest to create its own public from which to generate support, realizes that it's far better to ride the wave of Islamic revival for its own purpose. At the same time, the interest of the state and the Muslim community in particular, as I said, these interests overlap but don't coincide. The state authorities fund religious education in state-approved institutions at home and abroad, and support religious enculturation of the masses at mosque. And these masses, these sort of mass of people who come to Friday prayers, they come there out of their own will, right? So this is a clear audience that the state also wants to address, of course. And for this, they have to go to maintain good relationship with the Dunk, in order, like, so that the audience, the parishioners also hear the state's message. For their part, the religious establishment and the wider religious community also aspire to fit into the state modernizing project and occupy a comfortable niche in the public realm in order to avoid popular accusations of Islamic extremism, archaism, and backwardness. In their article on the revival of Islam in Kyrgyzstan, Julie McBrien and Masjid Pelkmans describe a tension between a secular and religious attitudes in Kyrgyzstani society, as does Maria Law. McBrien and Pelkmans refer to people who still view religion in Marxist, quote, opium for the people fashion, archaic secularists. Maria Law, in her respective piece, also finds that secular-oriented people are not anti-religion per se, but are simply reacting to their society's oversaturation with religious messages, a situation what she calls too much honey, as they call it. Even too much honey can be, like, not pleasant and bad. Like in Kyrgyzstan, there also appears to be resentment in Kazakhstan to growing Islamicization, coupled with the fear of the encroachment of Islamic customs and lifestyles on secular state institution and a secular public. The 2011 law on religious activities that prohibited having prayer rooms in the state offices and in public universities is a reflection of some of the fear of excessive expression of religiosity in public space. And of course we have to emphasize that most of these public prayer rooms, of course, were like Muslim prayer rooms in universities and so on. But one of the points, like Dunk, actually took a very anti-state stance in this issue, and they advocated against this for public prayer rooms. And I hear that, as often happens in our part of the world, the stupid rules are not enforced, and so there are continues the praying is continuing. Like sometimes the rooms are not designated or semi-designated, and so on. So that's what I'm hearing from many even people who work for the Committee for Religious Affairs. The issue concerning the role of Islam in social life are not bottled up. They are open for public debate, and arguments about competing moral frameworks take place at different forums, from parliament to Facebook to life cycle ritual events. For instance, one of the most visible issues around which different types of ideological persuasions mobilize is the phenomenon of polygamy, which continues to exist as a phenomenon in the gray area between the secular legal framework that does not recognize it and religious and customary framework where instances of polygamous marriages are well known and tacitly accepted. There have been several attempts to legalize polygamy in the Majlis itself, the lower chamber of parliament, starting the first instance in 2001 and the most recent instance in 2013, but all of them have been thwarted by the dominant majority of the members of parliament. In addition, there has also been public outcry in the media and on the internet against the normalization of polygamous relationships. So there is a sort of movement, and there is a Facebook movement called Anti-Takalny Komitet. So Takal is the second wife, second or third or next wife. So there is so the goal of the committee, at least at its inception, was to publicly criticize the phenomenon and shame the women who agreed to polygamous relations. They would like really put the pictures, or look at this, she's Takal and how far. So that was like the phenomenon. Like this committee itself was also like in the worst tradition of the Komsomolskaya Sobranie. Sometimes. So it's notable that in my 15 months of observation in the Hazrat Sultan Mosque and following the sermons in person and on the internet, I have not heard the imams leading the sermons to take a stance for polygamy on the pulpit, even though family issues, the issues of marriage, divorce, responsibility of relatives towards each other, respect towards parents, etc., are discussed like at length. And the messages are quite conservative. For instance, there is a message that you have to marry as soon as possible. Like you should not like walking around and indulging in sort of bachelor life, unmarried, and so on. So it's good. So the messages on marriage and so on are very conservative. But at these sermons, they never spoke on polygamy. So when I asked one of the imams why such a message have never been, such an important issue have never been tackled, he, like Imam said directly, Imam replied that no good would come from stirring the public sentiments by making official pronouncement to the whole country that would encourage Muslim women to wear hijab in mass or condone different types of polygamous marriage. However, the same Imam said that they're always there for people who seek their counsel in the issues of hijab or polygamous marriages, and are ready to support them. So, and there are sort of more private circles, like private conversations that people can have with imams where all of these issues are addressed. So, establishing orthodoxy. Like many governments across the globe and the region, Kazakhstan government is also implicated in following the rhetoric of the global war on terror and impeaching bad extremist Islam against good moderate Islam. While what is bad Islam is more or less clear, it's widely perceived as the Islam that is practiced by those who then, after practicing such bad Islam, commit terrorist act. What good Islam is remains to be defined, and it's not an easy job to try to establish the body of quote-unquote good Islam that is clearly based on doctrinal principles, yet simultaneously acceptable to social political norms of already existing Muslim societies. In his book on Islam in post-Soviet Uzbekistan, Yohan Rasayanagam shows this predicament, the Imam's dilemma, when, for instance, Uzbek Imams have to navigate between orthodoxy and state-promoted ziyarat. Unlike neighboring Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, however, Kazakhstan's government is not engaged in a sort of total witch hunt for Wahhabis and Salafis, people who practice Islam differently from how it is prescribed by the state authorities, but do not plan to overthrow the government, to establish caliphate instead of the current government. So, and as I was told by one of the functionaries of the Committee on Religious Affairs, they actually learned from Tajikistan's experience of outlawing, prohibiting Salafism as ideology in 2011, so that they come to the mosque and take out people who pray in a different way, and sort of, because nothing, like it didn't create any good, and sort of it didn't decrease the spread of Salafism. It sort of people still sort of follow what they believe and so on. But there is sort of more conflict within the society. At the same time, the boundary between good and bad Islam, however fuzzy, needs to be demarcated, and it is a responsibility of the state-supported religious authorities to establish and demarcate this border ideologically. As frequenters to this Astana mosque and other Astana mosques say, there is an ongoing sort of ideological, not battle, but I guess warnings against so-called alien religious movements, and imams of the mosque constantly remind their parishioners to stay on the right path, not just according to Islam, but within Islam. At the entrance to the main prayer hall of the Hazrat Sultan Mosque, there are Soviet-style announcement boards with instructive illustration teaching the public how to pray according to Hanafi Mazhab, and this is sort of the issue of contention because there are some minor differences in praying styles, and sort of the emphasis on Hanafi way of ibadah, way of praying is very strong. I have different views about the degree of authoritarian imposition with which Hanafi style of ibadah is fostered at the Hazrat Sultan Mosque. Some interviewers considered it to be quite mild and merely limited to reminders during the prayer, to adhere to the, not to say Ameen loud after reading the Fatiha, not raising hands after At-Tahiyyat, not holding hands close to chest, they should be closer on the level of waist in Hanafi Mazhab, and not holding one's feet too apart from each other. So these are, as the prayer is going, this kind of thing reminded, hold your hands this way, like don't cite Fatiha, don't read Quran loudly, like this is going on. But as it is also because most of the public who comes to the mosque, some of them, I don't know, much of the public doesn't know how to pray at all. So while they are teaching, they're also teaching people how to pray, but in Hanafi style. My own observation at the Hazrat Sultan Mosque has been that Hanafi styles are taught usually after the mandatory Friday prayer to those, there's a lesson of prayer after the Friday prayer. To those, and they're taught to those among the public who don't really know how to pray at all and are not rigidly imposed on those who are acculturated in their prayers. Like there are people who say Ameen after Fatiha and nothing happens to them. There are people who recite Quran like while Imam is also reciting, reciting, and nobody is coming and taking them, and but there is this sort of ideological battle going on. However, once in a while, the mosque also sends a clear message about what kind of interpretation of Islam is acceptable. In the course of 1 year, the mosque delivered 3 special sermons directly dedicated to battling alien religious movements, one such sermon was I heard by the chief of the Youth Affairs Department within Doom. The sermon was entitled "Tak Verschleerding Tungen Qaob," the danger coming from the proponents of Taksir, and the movement was Dawa al-Hijra. So this was the sermon against Takfir Shler, and in particular Dawa al-Hijra. And this is a quote from the sermon. "They are ready to call everybody who disagrees with them kafir," said they. "They consider kafir those who commit sins as well as those who follow government law," he continued. "If their own parents don't hold namaz and raza, they also call them kafir." The Imam then argued that unlike what Takfir Shler says, the Quran teaches forgiveness. And if a person repents, Allah forgives even those who committed grave sins, with the exception of the great sin of shirk, believing in a deity other than Allah. And there are always many sort of instances where they sort of emphasize this, the forgiveness. There's a story of the man who killed 99 people, and then he was on the way to repentance, and then he died halfway, and then it was like I heard this story I think 4 times in the mosque about the forgiveness and the people. So how can they call the government? And they also emphasize that our government is not a kafir government, and the reason for this is that our government supports Islam and builds mosques and does so many things for Islamic education and so on. if in the discursive field of differentiating between the bad and good moderate Islam, the imams have to follow the state's lead and give precedence to the method of state security, there are some other fields in which imams take leadership in establishing orthodoxy without much interference and guidance from the state. One of such fields is teaching people to stay away from pre-Islamic folk tradition, different kinds of fortune-telling and healing practices. There are many sermons on that, like that. One sermon, the name of the sermon was Balgirgia Nanba, Baksira Barma, don't trust the fortune teller, don't seek help from the healer. And they are very sort of open in denouncing these practices, and like there are many sermons on that. So, in the course of my fieldwork, it has been like regarding the there is also this production of Hanafi learning. This is a brochure produced by the Almaty Tulebimishit, and it also it says Kulshulus Papa, but it's mainly again about the Hanafi ways of praying and what and how they come to be such and what is the right way of praying. But there is also production of the life of Imam Azam Abu Hanifa, like the book. This is from the Kazakh Encyclopedia publisher. There is also this book on some Hanafi ulama that's from Kirdira. There is also a book by Ashrbek Aghay, which is a scholarly book, Hanafitский Mosques, Истории Global Central Asia. It's an excellent scholarly work. It was edited by the Russian, the Academy of Sciences, and I did not carry it just to show, because I really carried it to read. I could have taken a picture, but just to show that there is sort of an effort by larger society to sort of teach people what sort of Hanafi tradition is, because sometimes that's why they say that that's why Salafis have the upper hand, because their body of knowledge is clearer. So we have to build this. We have to really know, and we have to be orthodox in Islamic ways. So it has become clear in the course of my fieldwork that the issues of interrelation and harmony between the national and religious tradition are at the core of Imam's very own intellectual efforts of establishing and propagating good Islam. Islam that is based on the orthodoxy, recognized in the wider Muslim world, and simultaneously rooted in the body of so-called national tradition, as well as fitting already existing secular sensibilities and widespread notions of modernity and progress. The Muftiyat announced the year of 2014 to be the year of religion and tradition, and a group of Muftiyat scholars have co-authored a book of the same title. While doing my fieldwork, I heard 3 very interesting sermons on this subject at the Hazrat Sultan Mosque. The first sermon was by the chief imam, and he's a deputy of the chief mufti of Kazakhstan, Serikbay Kazhi. It was an introductory sermon into this issue and was called the interrelation between religion and tradition. Din men dasturdan sabahtastығы. Serikbay Kazhi dwelt on the meaning of the Kazakh words urf and adiyat. They are both borrowed from Arabic, urf and adam, respectively, and both connote tradition. In Arabic, Serikbay Kazhi said, al-urf means activities and practices that make good sense to the people, and al-adat means repeated and popular practices. The Imam explained that there is a well-trodden place in Sharia for urf, as Allah Himself said in Quran, adopt forgiveness and enjoy the good, which is urf, and turn away from the ignorant. Urf counts as a source of Sharia if it does not come against the primary sources of Quran, Sunnah, and the consensus of Islamic scholars. The meaning of counting urf among the sources of Sharia, according to Serikbay Kazhi, is because the ways of Muslim majorities in certain places could be trusted. So it comes from the trust to the Muslim community for keeping tradition and sort of continuing this tradition. He's unquoted, this is a sermon I'm retelling you. He's unquoted the companion of the Prophet, Abdullah ibn Masud, who said, what Muslim count is good is also good before Allah. Serikbay Kazhi also stated that it is not the purpose of Islam to create homogeneous societies throughout lands, because Islam recognizes that people are created different in different communities with different customs, languages, and tradition. There is another sermon that I also want to quote. that was like this, the Central Mosque in Astana, the one thing was that they have these guest speakers, so the imams from the oblast, they come and sometimes deliver the lecture from the pulpit. So this was a lecture by the chief imam of the Karaganda Central Mosque. He says, Kazakh tradition and Islam have been inseparable since the time when the Khan of Turkey Khanate, Karahan, accepted Islam in the 10th century. He continued, Kazakh tradition has been formed by Islam and has been inspired by Islam. Unfortunately, many young people do not comprehend it today. And he's referring to the fact that Salafis recruit from the young people who don't speak Kazakh, for instance, which is, I heard many anecdotes to this. He then gave several examples of misunderstanding of Kazakh tradition by someone. This is a lengthy quote from him. A mother of young men who studies Quran and Sunnah came to me to complain that her son ordered her not to make shilpek, fried pita bread, in preparation for Quran or Khutu ceremony on Friday. This man told his mother that making shilpek is bid'ah. Astaghfirullah. The problem is that this young man does not understand the meaning of making shilpek. Kazakhs make shilpek for sadaqah and hand them out to poor people. Why? Because people's wealth was not measured with money, but by the livestock and the food they had. There were times during Kazakh history, such as Akhtaban Shuguranda, this is a White Hill fight, which happened during the war with Jongars, when people were dying of hunger, even though they had stored gold and silver. Even the richest could not exchange silver the size of a horse head for one slice of bread. That is when the prophet came. Altın kümüs tas iken, arpa biday as iken. Silver and gold are just stones, but wheat and barley are bread, are always bread. Then people understood what kind of things have the highest value. They say that the tradition of giving sadaqah and reading prayers goes against Islam, but there is a hadith when the Prophet said, addressing Sahaba, prepare gifts for the dead. But what kind of gifts can we give the dead? Asked the puzzled Sahaba. Dua, the prayer, and sadaqah, replied the Prophet. So our Kazakh ancestors were acting on the basis of this hadith and were continuing the Islamic tradition in their own way. In similar way, the speaker went on to defend other Kazakh tradition of Salem Biru, like this is a bowing to, like that the new bride makes to the parents of the groom and relatives. And some Salafi followers said that this tradition is a shirk because this is bowing to somebody who is not Allah. And as the speaker Imam explained, this tradition is not about worshipping but about showing respect, as it is known that Allah Himself asked angels to make sujood, to prostrate to Prophet Adam, chapter 2, verse 34. And this sujood was not intended as worship, but as a sujood of respect and recognition of authority and of the rank of man over angels. The Imam then went to say that some of the young Kazakh Muslims who travel abroad also adopt like their way of clothes and so on, but this also comes from not realizing, not knowing their own ways. Left?
Yeah, maximum.
Okay. Another sermon was delivered by Naib Imam of Hazrat Sultan. Okay, there are also many sermons that addressing the issues, and there are also the sermons addressing like the nature of tradition. The tradition is changing. The tradition changed during the time of Abu Hanifa when he introduced the guarantee for one's products. So the tradition that something is always evolving because the Muslim community is evolving, and the Muslim community agrees that this tradition is good and this is bad, and so this is good enough. So it's interesting to like the structure of the sermon, which I think a separate word needs to be said about the structure or organizational work that goes into preparing the sermons, about the imams who deliver them and the audience who listen to them. The audience, as I said, of this mosque is between 6,000 and 7,000 people, from construction workers coming to the prayer in their uniforms, to swap high-ranking officials and business people driving to the mosque in their SUVs and working on their laptops while in the mosque. The space space of is very bourgeois. Like you can sort of, I saw people sleeping there. I saw people working on their laptops. It's a very sort of library kind of environment, which is very safe, very clean and carpeted. So it's a nice environment. None of the current imams have had a proper theological education. On the previous first imam of the mosque, Khairaj al-Dubai, had a bachelor's degree in CERIA from Al-Azhar, which is in fact very difficult to obtain, as I wrote in one of my articles a long time ago. 4 out of 6 Naib imams had the initial bachelor's degree from the Otrar Kazakh Arab University in Shymkent, and we, yesterday, Asharbek Apai and I were trying to establish where this university came from and how it finished its existence, and I think he will talk about this in his presentation. So they, I think several of them also had, so they have degrees in what's called religious studies, религиоведение, or Dintanu in Kazakh. They also had these degrees from Almaty and Astana, master's degrees. They also briefly studied, some of them at Nur Mubarak University, where several Azhari scholars teach, and most of the Naib Imams have also studied in Turkey. For instance, the Sirikpai Qaji, he studied at Seljuk University, in the theology faculty of the Seljuk University. All of them speak good classical Arabic, many of them speak Turkish, and I looked when they prepare for the sermons, they often use Turkish sermons and then translate them into. This broad educational, some of them also speak adequate English. This broad educational background, in addition to linguistic expertise, added to the experience of having traveled abroad, particularly in the Islamic world, adds to their status and moral authority among parishioners. The current nature of religious authority in Kazakhstan seems to constitute a marked change from how it used to be in the Soviet times and even in the first decade of independence. So this, just to show you, this the forum of imams that I attended, and what I noticed, there was this is the fetishization of religion, the sabrania of imams, and but what I noticed that most of the imams, of course, even in the central mosque, they're young, they're younger than me. They are delivering sermons to the 6,000 people of different ages, and their authority is very textual. So it's based on right quotes, and sometimes they even quote the pages from where they are. I heard them quoting pages this is from Ibn Taymiyyah collections, page such and such. So the authority comes from being able to construct arguments from evidence from the text. In addition to this textual scholarly knowledge, imams also have to possess extensive public performance skill and eloquence in Kazakh language. As sermons at the Hazret Sultan, as well as most of the mosques in Kazakhstan, with a few notable exceptions of Uyghur and Uzbek mosques, are delivered in Kazakh. The general themes for sermons are pre-approved in the beginning of the year by the Board of Muslims, particularly the Council of Ulamas and the Department of Sermons. Thematically, most of the sermons explain matters of Islamic doctrine with the emphasis on spiritual development and the practice of Islamic propriety, so spiritual repentance, as I said before, forgiveness, so the state between the fear and hope. There are several sermons on the state of being content with what is graceful. The sermons also follow the mixture of the state, national, and religious calendar. For instance, on the eve of the Independence Day, the speaker imam spoke what a blessing independence was for Kazakhs, particularly since they now can practice their religion. On the eve of the Constitution Day, the chief imam delivered a sermon explaining the importance of upholding just rule based on the Constitution, as well as following the rule, the law of the land, as well as religion. On the Victory Day, the sermon was about the obligation to defend one's country and so on. At the same time, religious celebration like Ramadan, Qurbanite, Mawlid, the holy months of Shaban and Rajab are also in the calendar. Even though the general themes of the sermons and oftentimes the ayats and hadiths that go within the sermons are pre-approved for the whole country. So the whole country listens to one topic. Okay, but that was also justified by the fact that, as imam at the mosque said, alдағы имамдар олар білмейді кейде. So it was justified by the ignorance or by the sort of lack of education at the local level sometimes of the proper. Okay, I'll just maybe, what can I say in conclusion? So in conclusion, I just wanted to show the picture of the Victory Day parade passing through the mosque and people standing. But I guess I think I did not include this picture. Well, I guess that's the state of the